So we're seeing it more and more when it comes to women's basketball that going to a South Carolina, going to a UConn, going to somewhere where you're just going to try to win a national championship is not always for the best. It's not always going to be for the best, and I'm not sure it's going to be for the best for some players long term. I think it's going to be really interesting to see when it comes to Paige Bueckers in the WNBA, because Paige Bueckers, if you looked in high school, Paige Bueckers played with the same freedom of a Caitlin Clark. Paige Bueckers played with that type of flair. There was a like amount of flair that Paige played with that was like unseen, unheard of. Which is why Paige Bueckers was so hyped as a young player. Was that she was not only incredible, she was unbelievably fun to watch. Which is also, in hindsight, why Caitlin became so popular. Is because it's not just because she was so good. It's because she played with a freedom. Caitlin Clark processes the game super fast, but she plays, if you guys watch Caitlin Clark, she will play with instinct. And she makes mistakes. She makes a lot of mistakes, but does an awful lot of good. And we saw when it came to Iowa, where it's like Lisa Bluter changed her entire philosophy on basketball to be like, no, this is how good Caitlin Clark is. We are going to, we don't care the fact that she's turnover prone. We don't care about the fact that, she's not your traditional guard that's going to just pass the ball to a big. We don't care that she's not your traditional shooting guard that's just going to shoot the ball every time they touch it. She is a modern NBA type, modern basketball lead guard who can create, creates plays. Who creates plays for herself, creates plays for others, creates plays for the team, and draws enough gravity, and her gravity will create plays for teammates. And South Carolina have a player like that in Malaysia Fulwiley. And she was brilliant yesterday. Like, don't get twisted. Like, she was absolutely brilliant. She's still coming off the bench for South Carolina. But, like, she is as fast as it comes. Like, for me, she's their best player. She's got that handle. She can attack the basket. She can shoot. She can pass. She's not a selfish player most of the time. Like, naturally, she's not. She is a hooper. And when I mean, like, hooper, she is, like, it's ridiculous how easy the game comes for Fulwiley. Like, for me, I put her as I would put her as, like, a peer, as far as ability-wise, of a Hannah Hidalgo, of a Juju Watkins. But we've seen with what happened with Caitlin Clark, that these absolutely elite players, choosing the right college is important. And for a player like a Fulwiley, maybe going to a college where your coach where you're trying to win a national championship is not the best idea in the world. Not even trying to win, where your team has got a whole bunch of 5-star recruits around you, is not the best thing in the world for your development, for your game. Because she is coming off the bench for a Raven Johnson who can't score. Yes, Raven Johnson's incredible on defense. Raven Johnson cannot score. But, like, Fulwiley can just do everything. She does everything on the floor. And, like, she's playing on such a short leash. And there is always, for me, there is that bit of, when it comes to these type of players, we've seen with Caitlin Clark where it's like, if you give these players freedom, they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to, when you're as good as Fulwiley is, when you're as good as Clark is, when you're as good as Juju Watkins is, you gotta let these players be them. And you can tell with Dawn Staley. You can tell Dawn Staley's trying, but Dawn Staley was a WNBA point guard whose job was, get the ball to the bigs. And Dawn Staley's a really, really good coach. But her job as a player was to be a point guard. And she still looks at the game. And that's one of the problems with Staley, is like she was a 9 point a game average player who didn't really shoot the ball very much. But she was that point guard. She was a flat out elite point guard, but her job was to get the ball to other players. You can tell by the way she's interviewing here that in her head it's like, point guard's job is to pass, shooting guard's job is only to score and never to look to pass, big center's job is to stay in the paint. And like, it's, for me, someone like a Fulwiley, who is a modern basketball player, playing for a really good coach. Don't get it twisted. Dawn Staley is a really good coach, but a old school coach as far as her philosophy in the game. I don't think that matches up. Like, they might win another championship. She might be good. But if you swapped her with Juju Watkins on USC, I don't think the team loses that much. If you gave her to a really good team that isn't South Carolina and gave her the keys, she would be talked about in the same breath as Juju Watkins and Hannah Hidalgo. But like, listen to what Dawn Staley's saying. And it's funny because what Dawn Staley's saying is right, but like, she's looking at it from the perspective of, how can I make her work with my team? The problem is that she is a player that you should build a team around. But South Carolina are good, like, not that they're good enough, like, they might be too good to build around one player because they've got too many good players. Like, I think if she went to a different college, I think she might have, like, I think if she transfers, she could be the number 2 pick. She's that good. She is that good.
It's a battle with Lay, and it's not that she understands. Like, she really understands. She's really dynamic. She's a dynamic guard. I thought, for the most part, she was lean as lean could be. Like playing great. And sometimes she can't bite the bullet. But if she could play as lean as she played today, I can eat some of the stuff that she tries to do. Is when it's not as lean as it was today, you're still trying, and maybe sometimes that gets her going a little bit. So she, I give her a little leeway with it, but I also let her know, I let her know during the game, like, your game was like great, like efficient, it's the game slowed down for you. You were doing a lot, you were facilitating. And then she gets anxious to make a play. And a lot of times it is to her teammate. Like, it is an unselfish thing that really gets her in trouble. For us, we want her to go score. Don't go try to make the spectacular pass. They're not ready. They're not ready. So go score, you miss, they're going to get the rebound. So it's those types of instances. And it's just a conversation. Like, I enjoy it. She knows now. Like, she could actually, if I say something.
And that's, like, I actually have no problem with the way Dawn Staley is talking, but I just think and this is when it comes for just women's basketball in general, where it's like, you can very much see that, like, she knows how good she is. But her logic is, which is the right thing to do as a coach, by the way. I don't really have a problem with, like, Dawn Staley's been incredible. She's an incredible coach. But her whole thing is like, okay, she's going to do wild stuff. How can we make sure that, like, the wild stuff isn't to the detriment of the team? And from any time I've watched her play, she's good enough that it's not. And it's almost like this is a Christy Sides. Obviously, she's 100 times better coach than Christy Sides, but it's that philosophy of shooting guards shoot, point guards pass. So I'm just looking at it like, I don't think she's going to leave South Carolina. A lot of people saying she needs to transfer. I think it becomes interesting next year when Pow Pow's gone, when Raven's gone, when Kitts is gone, and she's the player. I think next year it's going to be her team. So I wouldn't necessarily transfer. But it does show that if, for example, like, it does show that certain players will be held back depending on where they are in college. Again, that can, like, not at the expense of winning, like, you can be held back, but you can win, which is as important a thing when it comes to college. But for me anyway, especially with pro women's basketball growing, I think that holding back certain players that are going to draw in draw in like audiences. Just like, for example, had Enrique gone to UConn instead of Notre Dame, and had Enrique been told to hold it back, like, she's a great player to watch, albeit she's not as good. I think Fulwiley is better than Enrique was in college, but you've got a player that is a ultra dynamic guard, and like a lot of people are talking about how the WNBA needs to grow. And there's like no defense being played in the NBA. Not even no defense. The offense is just too good. The most efficient way of playing NBA basketball is boring. But WNBA is still 25 years behind. They're still playing 90s basketball. I think as a coach, when you have a dynamic guard that is going to be, I think, one of the pillars of the future of basketball, of women's basketball, I don't think trying to limit what that explosive guard does. I think you give these guards more freedom, because when it all comes down to it, late in games, the playmakers are going to be the difference makers. And there is a severe lack of them in women's basketball. There is a severe lack of playmakers that can play the game with freedom, because they've been all kind of put in a box, because all the best players have played for Gino Auriemma, who will keep his players in a box, who will not allow his players really to fully express themselves. And same when it comes to a lot of these other teams. Whereas that's the biggest reason why Caitlin Clark succeeded, is she had a coach that did allow that. And you've got Fulwiley, who is superb as a player, and a coach who you can tell knows how good she is, but is more focused on making Fulwiley fit in rather than allowing Fulwiley to play to the best of her ability. And that's just my opinion on it all. You guys can agree, you guys can disagree. I don't think she's going to leave South Carolina because of all the seniors that are leaving this year, especially at the guard position if Raven Johnson goes to the W. And then you've got her coming in as their main guard threat next year. I think she's going to stay. She's going to have good players around her. But if I'm Dawn Staley, I'm giving her a little bit more freedom. Because if you want to win it all this year, especially with this UConn team, you're going to need her to be at her best. You're not going to need her second guessing herself and questioning what to do on the floor. You're going to need her playing with that freedom, playing with the instincts she has, having the ball in her hands, and realistically, having her on the floor at times rather than Raven Johnson. Because if she can hit some shots, she's that good on defense, she just cannot shoot the ball at all.